batter up. Back in the 20s, it was baseball's golden age. There was Babe Ruth, Ty Cobb, heroes of the sports page. The Yankees were winning, had the best team in the land. Millions of American citizens cheered them from the grandstands. But back then in the majors, things that were not right. Every one of the 16 teams had 25 players, all white. Ruth was famous coast to coast, a hero if you please. And some of the greatest players of all time were in the Negro Leagues. Yes, there were. One of these men was named Lou Dials. We'd love to have you play for us. You're good as all the rest, but your skin's just too dark, Mr. Dials, Mr. Dials. Baseball is a white man's game. Said your skin's just too dark, Mr. Dials, Mr. Dials. Baseball is a white man's game. Lou never made it to the bigs, he was born before his time. But for 20 years, Lou played ball and was known to every single black man. We'd love to have you play for us, you're good as all the rest. Your skin's just too dark, Mr. Dials, Mr. Dials. Baseball is a white man's game. Your skin's just too dark, Mr. Dials, Mr. Dials. Baseball is a white man's game. Your skin is just too dark, Mr. Dials, Mr. Dials. Baseball is a white man's game.
During the mid-1920s, Calvin Coolidge presided in the White House, jazz was popular in nightclubs throughout the country, and baseball reigned as America's favorite pastime. Sports headlines praised the triumphs of the great players, Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, and Waite Hoyt, names that were as familiar to the American public as that of the country's president. These were the days when real grass covered the diamond and baseball was everyone's summer sport. It was also a time when the only players on the major league field were white. But in ballparks across the nation, dark-skinned versions of Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig played before audiences often numbering in the tens of thousands. Yet for all their skill, these men received little recognition from the general public, since newspaper accounts of their team victories and defeats were usually ignored by the white man's media. This racial prejudice caused most of the black greats of baseball to remain unknown outside their own community. Despite this lack of recognition from the white population, noted black players like Josh Gibson, Satchel Paige, and Lou Dials excelled in the game, their talents often surpassing those of their white counterparts who were playing in the majors. This is the story of one Negro League baseball player, Lou Dials, who played baseball virtually year-round for more than 20 years. The separation between the races in baseball began in 1887 when Cap Anson, then player-manager of the Chicago White Stockings, protested the presence of Fleetwood Walker, a black pitcher for Toledo. When Anson's request to remove Walker was denied, he pulled his team from the game. Anson then proceeded to lead a successful campaign against black participation in baseball. Faced with an impenetrable color curtain, blacks tried for many years to form their own leagues. Their first successful league was formed in 1906. It was called the International League, with an open membership to all non-whites. Much like migrant workers following the harvest, black teams traveled throughout the nation and neighboring countries playing baseball year-round. From the early 1920s to the late 1940s, the Negro Leagues flourished and produced many great players. In 1940, Hall of Famer Gabby Hartnett said, if managers were given permission, there'd be a mad rush to sign up Negroes. Hartnett had seen teams such as the Pittsburgh Crawfords and the Homestead Grays, and he knew great players when he saw them. Even though there was a color barrier, Major League teams still wanted the best players. In 1912, the New York Giants signed a Negro player whose real name was Charlie Grant. They tried to pass him off as an Indian named Chief Tokahoma, but the deception was exposed when some of Grant's friends came to visit him. Grant never played in an actual game. In the winter of 1946-47, Branch Rickey wanted to bring Robinson up to the Dodgers, but he first needed the permission of the then baseball commissioner, Happy Chandler.
Now, Landis was commissioner for 24 years, and during his time, they made repeated efforts to break the color line, to admit the black fellas. I knew Josh Gibson, who was one of the great catchers of all time, and he died without ever having a chance. Satchel Paige said if I'd have been the commissioner, he'd have won 30 games for 30 years, and he might very well have. He was one of the greatest pitchers of all time. Leonard and all the others I knew personally, and I'd had an opportunity to watch them play. Landis knew about them too, and he knew about their petitions, but every time they asked him, he said the answer is no. In 1947, the owners met at the Waldorf Astoria in New York, and they anticipated that Rickey might want to bring Jackie Robinson from Montreal to Brooklyn. So they discussed it for 2 hours. It was a secret meeting and closed to the press. But I presided over the meeting, and after their 2-hour discussion, they took a vote. And they voted 15-1 not to let him play. Well, that discussion and that vote was to give Rickey notice and to give me notice. I knew what was for, you understand. Well, as soon as that meeting was over, Branch Rickey called me on the telephone and said, Commissioner, I want to come down Kentucky and see you. And I said, all right, come on. I knew what he was coming for. Came down to the cabin on the backside of my place here, where I've made all of my important decisions for the last 50 years. It's been there for 50 years. And he said to me, I can't do this in the face of this vote. See, these 15 fellows were his partners. And he said, I can't bring this fella in unless I'm assured of your complete cooperation and support. And I said, Mr. Rickey, I know that. And I said, I've thought about this thing a great deal. And as a member of the Senate Military Affairs Committee, I saw these black fellows all over the world, many of them fighting and offering to die for the freedom of mankind and fighting for their country. And then when they come back home, they're told they can't play the national game. I said, I don't believe it's fair. I don't think it's just, and I don't think it's decent. And I'm going to have to meet my maker someday, and if he asks me why I didn't let this boy play, and my only answer is he was black, that might not be a satisfactory answer. I said, you bring him in, and I'll approve of the transfer of his contract from Montreal to Brooklyn. I was the only fellow on earth could do it. And if Landis is commissioner, he don't play. And I said, we monitored every game he played. And of course, all the Southerners got mad. I was called upon to make a decision. If I make this decision he can play, he plays. If I say no, he can't play. And if I'd have said no, they would have perpetuated the thing that endured for such a long time, up until 1947. If you're black, you can't play.
When Robinson signed his first major league contract with the Brooklyn Dodgers, the color barrier began to fold. Baseball managers quickly turned to the available talent within the black leagues and hired the best of its players. In turn, the black community responded by attending the games in great numbers. Though forced to sit in segregated bleachers roped off from the white fans, blacks flocked to stadiums across the country by the thousands. Within a short time, blacks showed that they could play with the best of the white players. The career of Lou Dial spanned a 50-year period. During this time, he played as a professional baseball player in the black leagues, managed a Mexican baseball team, acted as a talent scout for Major League Baseball, and worked as a batting instructor. Like many players, Dial's first memories of baseball were in the sandlots near his childhood home in California during the early 1900s.
The guys would go around on Saturdays. We'd go from one part of town to the other, and we had little pickup teams. and I'd just go around and play. And I used to bat cross-handed when I was a kid, and when I got to high school, I could hit the ball doggone a long ways cross-handed. So the coach told me, he says, turn over, and he said, try hitting on the left side. And I turned on the left side, and that seemed more natural than it did the right side. So about, maybe 6 or 7 or 8 months, I learned how to hit on my right side, hit correctly. And that's how I started hitting from both sides.
Due in part to his father's influence, Dials enrolled in an electrical engineering course during high school. After graduation, he entered State Teachers College in California, and from there transferred to the University of California at Berkeley to study electrical engineering. He received his degree in 1927.
Oh, I went up to State Teachers College up in Santa Barbara, which was a branch of the University of California as of today. And I stayed up there and played football up there on the team, which was called the Foothills at the time. Played halfback on the team, and we played various schools around in our class. It wasn't a finished college. And then I came down, in the wintertime, I came down to play baseball, and that's how I lost my scholarship before I went up to Cal. And I was ineligible to play at the University of California of North in Berkeley. But nevertheless, I went up, and then I come down, and then at the end of the 25 season, that's when I went up to Kansas City, and Rogan and them of the Kansas City Monarchs, at least, had recommended me, and Rube Foster had sent for me. My mother called me and told me about it, and I went to Chicago. But I came back later on during the winter season, and I finally finished in 1927. Then after I received my degree, I tried unsuccessfully to get employment, so I had baseball to fall back on.
Dials didn't use his training in electronics for almost 20 years. Instead, he pursued his exceptional talent in baseball.
Then in the winter, they had a club that came out here. They were all Negro major leaguers, and they used to play over on 4th and Anderson. And then consequently, they built a new park over on the east side, right back at Jefferson High School. And I used to go over there and watch those guys, and I'd go out there with my little glove, and the guy'd chase me off. And one day, they had a pickup team over there. And I played with one of the pickup team, played against the Negro club because they were just practicing. And I was tearing those pitchers up. And the guy said, well, give that little young guy a suit and let him play, because the rest of the fellows hadn't came out. And I played the first game that was ever played in the White Sox ballpark. I played right field because McNair, Kansas City Monarchs, he hadn't arrived. And that's how I started playing. Well, the next year, they let me play. And the only reason that I didn't like it because I found out that the manager of the club, from the cut that they were getting, the guys were making $60 or $70, sometime more than that on Saturday, and on Sunday they were making close to $100 every week. And the guy was only giving me a fourth of a cut. And so Newt Allen says, how much she give you? How much did Lonnie give you? I say $25. And that's the reason I was disillusioned with playing for those fellas. I found out how they did. My daddy told me the same thing. He said, if you go back east, he said they were going to do you the same way.
Despite his family's misgivings, Lou left his California home for the Midwest. After a brief stay with the Monarchs, he left to join the Chicago American Giants, where he met someone who would have a tremendous influence on his future, Rube Foster, who is regarded as the father of Negro baseball.
Well, Rube Foster, I played for him very briefly because that was August, and the next year, Rube didn't come back. Rube, he had a stroke, and he never did come back. But the time that I played for him, he was very strict, and he had his ways, and all the ball players knew who Rube Foster was. And he was respected all over the league because he was the founder of the league. Not only did he was the founder of the league, he set up clubs in other towns, and he secured the ball players and secured owners to make the league as much like the white leagues, professional baseball, as it was. And we had leagues, 8 clubs was in the western, and there were 6 out east.
Baseball's popularity among the black community quickly came into focus as black players were symbolized as national heroes for an entire segment of the population.
I left in August. Rogan recommended me to the American Giants, and I left in August of 1925, and I went to Chicago. Well, I got there on a Saturday evening, and I went over to Bingo DeMoss's house. The next day, I went to the ballpark with him. We walked from 40th and Indiana over to 39th and Wentworth. And when we got over to Wentworth, I saw that line of people, and I looked at Bingo, and he laughed. I said, what's the matter? I said, well, what are these people eating for? He said, they're waiting to get in the ballpark. So when I went in the ballpark, they gave me a uniform. And when I came outside, I saw more Negroes than I'd ever seen in my life. And the Kansas City Monarchs were playing that day. I never will forget it. And I went into the Kansas City clubhouse, and all the guys there, practically all of them, I knew. And they said, well, you finally made it. I said, well, I'm here. And I said, thanks very much for you fellows helping me get here. And Kansas City beat the American Giants 18-0. I never will forget it. And Rogan was pitching. And that was the thrill of my life.
During 1930 and 1931, Lou Dials played with the Detroit Stars and manager Bingo DeMoss. In 1931, he received the highest honor of his baseball career, the Negro National League batting title with an average of .382. When Bingo DeMoss took over as manager of the Cleveland Giants in 1933, Dials followed and played 2 years before signing with the New York Black Yankees in 1935 and the Chicago American Giants in 1936. Dials credits DeMoss, who received recognition as an exceptional second baseman, as a guiding influence on his professional career. While a few names from the Negro League have become legendary, names like Cool Papa Bell, Josh Gibson, and Satchel Paige, there were a number of outstanding players who simply did not get the publicity, but who were equally great.
Mule Settles. He could hit the ball as far as anybody. Turkey Stern. In fact, Turkey Stern hit more home runs in the Negro League than Josh Gibson did. But Josh Gibson was publicized because he hit all those home runs playing out east, and most of them were hit against the little minor league clubs and semi-pro clubs. Another fellow that the people don't say anything about was Dewey Creasy and Wells of that St. Louis Star team. Both of those were excellent ball players, real excellent ball players. And the best hitter for 1 year in the Negro League was Walter Davis. They called him Steel Arm. Played in 1927. You couldn't get him out, hardly. That guy hit over 600. Nowhere in the world could you get him out. So the best player I ever saw, without a doubt, was Martin Diego. Martin Diego could do everything. The first time I saw Diego, he was playing outfield. He was playing right field for Hilldale. And he had one of the best arms in baseball. The next time Martin Diego, he was pitching, he won 20-some-odd games any time that he got ready to pitch in the Negro League. If he needed a second baseman, he could play it. I've seen him play everywhere. I've seen him play every position but catch. And he was on a club over in Cuba with Johnny Mize. Johnny Mize was the American Batting League champion. And they used to walk Diego to get at Johnny Mize. That was over in Cuba. Another time, not Indianapolis, but Louisville had won the American Association title, and they took their whole club over there in the winter. And then for spring training, they were going over there to show those guys how to play. So they played the Cubans, and the Cubans won 2 straight games because Lukey pitched one day and somebody else, some other guy pitched. Well, Lukey was a major league pitcher, so naturally he was going to win. So they said, the American National Association said, well, they don't have nobody to pitch tomorrow. I said, we'll beat them. And Daewoo shut them out.
With the segregation factor ever present, baseball still provided for an exciting and interesting lifestyle. Very few people overall, and even fewer blacks in particular, were able to travel and see the country as baseball players did during this period of history. As a young man with these opportunities available to him, Lou Diles recalls some of the events that made his baseball career memorable.
After the season was over in 1927, we played Coney Mack's All-Stars. And Coney Mack at that time, he had Charlie Gehringer and Art Shires. They had Benny Bengal from the Yankees was catching. They had Ted Lyons, Al Thomas of the White Sox, Earl Whitehill of Detroit, Ewell of Cleveland, and Imke of the Athletics. And we played them in Chicago and all the around cities around, like up in Wisconsin and Minneapolis and around Illinois there. We played them a series of 15 ball games, and we won 13 out of the 15. It was in the 9th inning of one game, and the score was tied 2-2. And I hit a towering home run up in the right field bleachers. My daddy jumped up and said, "That's my son, that's my son." The same one that didn't want me to play ball. So they said, "Sit down, Mr. Diles, sit down." Everybody told my dad to sit down.
In 1943, Diles almost became the first black man to play organized baseball in the 20th century, when the general manager of the Pacific Coast League in Los Angeles approached him about joining his team.
And he said, "We were going to ask you about going to spring training." And Sweeney said, "Yeah." I said, "I suggested that we get you to take you to spring training." He said, "You want to go?" I said, "Jesus, yeah, I want to go." So I told him, I said, "I'd like to bring Brewer with me too." He said, "Okay, you'll have a roommate with you." And Hugh said, "No, I'll be his roommate." So about 2 weeks prior to that time, in '39, 2 weeks prior, I just went around the office, because I lived not too far from the ballpark. I went over there and was sitting down talking. And at that time, he told me that there was no availability for me to play. And I asked him why. He said, because Wrigley said, no matter how good you are, he said, there's no place for you in organized baseball in the major league. So why utilize a space on the roster with somebody who could never do the big club any good?
While Diles and his teammates traveled extensively, they had few problems with racial discrimination, simply because they knew how to avoid potential problems. Lou Diles retired from professional baseball in 1946, before blacks began playing in the majors. In 1950, at the age of 46, he accepted an offer to return to professional ball to play for a club in Tijuana. However, the 4 years since his last game had taken their toll, as Diles found it difficult to compete in the younger man's sport.
I don't know why I let him persuade me into coming down there to play, but I went down there, and the salary limit was $250, and they gave me $250 and $250 under the table. When we got to Las Vegas, we played Las Vegas, and I told him, I said, I can't make it anymore. I said, doggone, it's too hard. You know, to play baseball and hurting don't make sense. So I played with him around about 3 months, and I called it a day. He called me a day. I didn't quit baseball. Baseball quit me.
Today, Lou Diles remains active with the sport as a frequent speaker at baseball seminars, and he's also a popular attraction at baseball card shows around the country.
I've often wondered what I would have been doing now if it hadn't been for baseball. I would have been retired, sure, but baseball gave me everything everything now that I don't regret a day that I spent playing baseball, the time that I consumed. In fact, I'm kind of glad they didn't give me a job doing something else, because I would have been old and out of the way, probably creeped over. Now I can get around. I have a bad knee, but that's all right. I got that from baseball. But to actually regret playing baseball, I don't. Baseball has been my whole life. And in the last couple of years, since 1984, since I started on this tour for decathlon, I found out how much baseball really meant to me. Prior to that time, I would just, just shove it off. But now it means more to me than ever.
Lou never made it to the bigs. He was born before his time. But for 20 years, Lou played ball and was known to every single black man. We'd love to have you play for us. You're good as all the rest. But your skin's just too dark, Mr. Dials, Mr. Dials. Baseball is a white man's game.